So what is it that God has in mind for us? Life more abundantly. Not just to survive, but life more abundantly. And not just physically. Heart, soul, mind, and strength on every level. Far more than we have often given him credit for. Our topic today, physical fuel for abundant living. And it's not just fuel. Again, it's not just about survival. Do you think God intends for us to enjoy our food? Yeah, absolutely. And there is fuel of other types that give us life and energy and health. But we're going to be focusing on the physical fuel today in this context. Now, just a little bit of recap, especially for those who haven't been here. This is sort of your common sense universal paradigm of what health and healthcare should be, especially in the sense of treating something. In modern society, the vast majority of our conditions are lifestyle caused and potentially lifestyle curable or at least partially treatable. And then we get to physiology, things that help the body function well again, getting back to normal healthy function, but coming largely from the external. And then we get to your standard prescription, surgery procedures, chemo, radiation, whatever. So all options are on the table. We just need a process to understand them and put them all together. Now, we talked in our first session about, do you remember? A little louder? Connection. TED Talk, 37 million views, researcher. She's basically saying that all these different researchers come to the same conclusion that we human beings exist to connect. And she's absolutely right. So whether you're coming at this from a scientific perspective or a spiritual or biblical perspective, it's why we're here. It's why we exist and why we should want to exist indefinitely. This is the model that we're using for how we understand how we tick. Remember heart, soul, mind, and strength? This is a little different format: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. And again, we exist to connect. Neurons, like what fill our heads, exist to connect. It's all about those interactions and signals and them working well. And as we look at the science of health and healthcare and what makes for people doing healthy things and living a long time, we repeatedly come back to find that it happens in community. It happens in context. And it starts to sound from the scientific perspective an awful lot like what church should be. So how do we as a church family experience this healthy community? And then how do we minister to our bigger community in the Salem area? We also looked at in the next session. Do you remember this question? All the major world religions, atheists, and neuroscientists actually all believe in the same desired outcome of human existence. What is it? Pleasure. Why would you want to be in heaven if it's not enjoyable? That would be hell. Right? So there's this universal commonality of all human beings, whether you are religious, you're anti-religious, or you're just purely coming from a scientific perspective. We are wired. The intention is pleasure. Eden, word for word translation, pleasure. The garden of pleasure. It is our Creator's intention. And pleasure in a pure sense on all aspects of our being. I just love this slide. It's just like picture's worth 1,000 words. Sunshine, big slab of watermelon, life is good. This is what it's about. Yes. Okay, now we set the stage with those first two sessions, and then the last session we started going through this structure for how do we understand these different components of whole person healthy living. We touched last time on resilience. Do you remember what resilience is? Your bounce back. It's the opposite of stress. It's your capacity to deal with stress, to go with the flow, your shock absorbers. In this session, before we get to that, so we talked about stress, how that works. There was so much I wish we could have gotten into, so much that is so helpful and so important. We just skimmed the surface. But we looked at the basic stress cycle and physiology and some things we can do to start to break that up. Short term, there's things we can do in the physical, emotional space. Long term, we need to look at how we're functioning, how we're put together as human beings, and why is it we end up with this stress being generated. Okay, so this session we are jumping over here to the food, the fuel, the nutrition. Is there any confusion on the topic of nutrition out there? Yeah, we laugh. It is so confusing. There are so many talking heads, so many different books. A number of your questions we have gotten. I think many of them we will cover in the process, and if not, we will try to at the end. Now, some of the best way that we can cover this, again, is with a video. We're going to have 2 video segments. Fad-proof nutrition. How to know what the best diet is for human beings. I'm Dr. Marc Braman. Everyone is so confused. Patients are confused. Doctors are confused. There's a new diet book and fad every year, it seems. The nutrition recommendations you hear on the nightly news seem to be changing all the time. People often just give up. Don't give up. We're going to help you be free from all that confusion and noise about nutrition. To do this, we need to work with a blank slate, though. So, for at least a few minutes, we need you to set aside all your assumptions about food and nutrition. Whether it is your master of the grill machismo persona or your rabid tree-hugging activism, just let it go for a few. Forget all the diet books you have read and the nutrition blogs you have perused. We need you to be free to ask honest questions and find honest answers. If we really want to know what the best nutrition is for human beings, how do we figure that out? What evidence would we want? What would be the very best kind of evidence? And wouldn't we look at multiple lines or different types of evidence? Now, if we set about to figure this out, the first thing we would logically want to know is what kind of nutrition produces the longest and healthiest lives for people of all different ethnicities and genetics all around the planet the most consistently. It turns out that work has been done. These are blue zones. Demographers used a blue pen originally to circle the Sardinian blue zone. Before this, they were just areas of demographically proven longevity. Dan Buettner teamed up with National Geographic and a team of demographers to study the people in these areas to see what they were doing that produced such extraordinary results. On the nutrition aspect, while they have significant cultural food pattern differences, what they all had in common was that their nutrition was 95+% unrefined plant foods. This is not the folklore of the Hunzas, with people not really even knowing when they were born and not having the scientific data. These are tangible, consistent, objective findings. The second line of evidence we would want to inform us about nutrition would be what are called controlled clinical trials of nutrition interventions to treat our common metabolic diseases. Diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, heart disease, and so on. We would see which diets are the most effective at halting or reversing the disease process. So, what do these types of studies show, and are they consistent with each other? Our number one killer is cardiovascular disease. Many studies have demonstrated that nutrition plays a central role in vascular disease and that it can actually be reversed, most of the time with lifestyle alone. What is the pattern of these studies? The more the diet shifts from our modern frankenfoods toward unrefined plant foods, the more the disease halts or reverses. The weight of evidence is very strong and very clear. And the research on other metabolic diseases follows this same pattern. The third line of evidence we would want to look at is what is patently, in your face, obvious to every human being. What equipment do we come with built in, and what does its design demonstrate it is for? In this case, as regards to nutrition. What is the most obvious aspect of human anatomy and physiology for eating? Our mouth, and our teeth in particular.
What kind of teeth do we have? What kind of materials are the physics of our teeth built for? Do we have bone-crushing molars and jaws like a hyena? Or do we have long, sharp canines like a cat? Are human teeth designed for crushing and grinding grains and vegetables, or ripping and tearing the hide of a buffalo? What kinds of animals have teeth most like ours, and what foods do they eat or do best on, naturally? It is self-evident that humans have teeth for things like biting into apples and turning those pieces of apple into sauce to swallow. If in doubt about this, just try eating a cow. I guarantee it won't happen with just your teeth. One of the most important principles of good scientific process is examining agreement or disagreement between different pieces of research or lines of evidence on the same topic. In this case, do our three best lines of evidence agree or disagree? Can we reconcile them? In fact, in this case, they are strikingly in harmony and pointing to the same conclusion. Human beings are designed for and run best on primarily unrefined plant foods. There it is. That's it. That is the big take-home message. You do not need to be a victim of the latest nutrition fads ever again. If we are going to make you truly nutritionally fad-proof, we should do a little additional myth-busting of the most common nutritional myths that suck people back into the whirlpool of talking heads confusion. Look for our next video.
We'll do that one in a minute. Online resource. So one of the questions has been, what about resources? So this video is online at lifestylefacts.org, as is the part number 2. So if you want to look at it again, if you want to share it with someone else, the intention of this video is how do we get people the tools to know how to interpret the noise and not be confused by it? How do you go about figuring out what the best basic nutrition is?
What is the website again?
Lifestylefacts.org, F-A-C-T-S. Lifestylefacts.org. Now, we had actually a skit planned for you, but some people had some family emergencies come up last night, so we will postpone that. I don't see too many of our young people here with us at the moment, but if there are young people that would be interested in participating in some of our skit illustrations, please contact us. We would love to have them involved in the process. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. How many of you have heard of the Blue Zones other than my mentioning it before? Good, 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 good. And what's the only one in the United States? Loma Linda, California. Interesting. What's that? Whole Adventist, yeah, we won't get into too many of the weeds right now. But this is really interesting. So they found all these places around the world where there's a lot of 100-plus-year-olds. Like, what's going on here? Let's go figure this out. And it just so happens the only one in the U.S. is Loma Linda. This is from Wikipedia, looking at some of the overlaps in their findings. And when you look right at the middle, what's common to, they took 3 of the blue zones. I don't know if you can read that. Family is a big deal, consistently. No smoking, that's not a surprise. Don't kill yourself. Plant-based diet. Constant, moderate physical activity. Not running triathlons every other weekend, but you just always engaged, usually in like gardening or sports or something. Social engagement. Again, what are we built for? Connection. And there are direct health benefits and there are many indirect health benefits from healthy engagement and connection. Do you see the bottom one? Legumes. What are legumes? Beans, peas, lentils, all those kinds of things. How many of you have heard relatively recently from a book written by a Loma Linda former professor that legumes are bad? Lectins
Yes.
are evil.
Many times I have heard.
Okay,
Many times.
remember our lines of evidence? What is the best evidence? around the planet what actually works in the real world, in the wild, in real life. And what are they doing? They're eating legumes. That is the standout food in an otherwise plant-based diet. And this wasn't created just to address this issue, this is just the data, what it always has been. So whatever's going on with lectins, this is the fundamental reality, and we can argue other details however we want. But this is what we follow, evidence level number 1. Okay. Another key concept, how would you know what fuel you should be putting in? We touched on it with our last point in that video. What are our teeth built for? These are built for apples and stuff. Just look at them physically. Look at the physics of the teeth, the physics of the jaw. We won't even worry about all the stuff we can't see, but it basically is the same idea. We're fundamentally built for these plant foods as our primary fuel supply. We'll get into some of the details and variations here in a little bit. But the core concept of fuel by design is really, really important and eliminates a lot of confusion. Now, we address some of those myths in the next video, so I won't go there yet. At some point, I want to write a book on nutrition. Forgive me, I know there's too many books out there already, but it would be simply this. It's called the UP diet. 2 principles, and they're both UP. Number 1, the science shows that unrefined plant foods should be our primary fuel supply. Notice I said primary, I didn't necessarily say exclusive yet. So unrefined, what is unrefined? Not processed, like what? Comes from nature. What are some examples of typical processed? Pasta, white pasta. So the key concept here in being refined or not is, have you taken the natural food substance and completely discombobulated it such that you really don't have nearly the nutrition? You just get lots of calories. So a lot of grain products, we take the whole grain and we do what? We make white flour, and then we make bread or pasta or pastries or whatever we're going to do with it.
Is olive oil considered refined thing because it's not oil? It's olive oil as in the olive, or just olive oil? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Can we address that one in the question section? It's a perfectly good question. Excellent question. What about olive oil? So what is the principle? We'll address it briefly now. What's the principle? Unrefined plant food. Is it an unrefined plant food? It's a concentrated extract. So it is a refined food. Now there's different levels of refinement, there's different levels of quality in what we end up with. And that's where we start to get into some of the details. And not all refining is the same. There's a whole spectrum of refining and what you end up with. Okay, number 2. Anybody have any guesses at what number 2 is? It starts with UP. I'm not going to expect you to know this. I just want to get you thinking. Uniquely personalized. Uniquely personalized. If someone is gluten sensitive, should they eat unrefined wheat? No. No. If you're allergic to cashew, should you eat unrefined cashews? No. Hello? If you've got other physical medical problems and you can't digest a lot of normal foods and you need some other thing, maybe even animal, what should you do? Get what you need. Fundamental principle, get what you need. This is in the spirit of prophecy, and we have completely missed this principle, and it's a big principle. And there's this whole thing in the United States today on personalized medicine, personalized healthcare. And they're looking at your whole human genome and what that means and, all that kind of stuff. But how do we, in my context as a physician, how do we treat the patient and not treat some national guideline? It makes me crazy when I see patients. I had a patient just recently. I'll spare you details, but some of the national guidelines say, okay, well, these patients should be on these 4 or 5 different medicines for the rest of their life if they've had this event. Well, he had an unusual circumstance. It wasn't a normal circumstance. When he was young, that he had a heart attack. And he's been suffering with the side effects of these medications for like 5 or 6 years, and no doctor would take him off of them or give him permission to go off of them. And you look at the facts and you treat the patient and not some checklist, and you go, well, yeah, you shouldn't be on those. You mean I can stop them? Yeah, like right now, please. You don't need them. This is inappropriate for you. There's too much going on. It's this one-size-fits-all running through the machine and the treadmill that's just crazy. And so this concept of personalized medicine is actually a really, really important concept, but uniquely personalized. Ellen White couldn't do beans. Yeah. She said they were poison to her. Legumes are great food, but they didn't work for her. So they had a cow. She was very keen on the quality of the food you eat, especially if it's coming from animal sources. But it was not this exclusive exclusionist thing. And we'll touch on some things. One of the things I want to cover as we go through the series, maybe during our lunches, is Adventist nutrition myth busting. Does that sound like fun? Yeah. Gets kind of fun. So if you have questions about Adventist nutrition culture, or you want to help us look at what the facts are to come back to the group with, please let us know. I've already got a pretty good list going, but we would love to have you engaged in that process. Okay, the UP diet. Those 2 principles will cover 95% of what people need to know about nutrition. Okay? It's not that complicated. What gets challenging is figuring out how to do this. And what I would encourage you to do, and what we are encouraged to do as Adventists, is reason from cause to effect and figure out what works for you. Rocket science. And it's so funny how we human beings, we get this idea in our head and we just like, no, it has to be exactly like this and everybody has to do it exactly the same way. And nope, sorry. Reality is not that way. Take the basic principles, understand them, work them for you, pay attention. Okay, well, I do this and I get this effect. Did that work? Well, maybe I need to give it more time. Maybe. Okay, try it for a while longer. Okay, well, this just isn't working for me. Well, then do something different, please. Please, do something different. Again, it's about, the science shows that it's the people who stay engaged in the process that ultimately succeed. It's not what you do with any given weed or detail. Okay, let's do a little myth busting, and hopefully this will be helpful to you for your own help, but also as a resource for other people. There are a lot of common myths out there.
If we are going to help you become truly nutritionally fad-proof, we need to do some myth-busting of the most common nutritional myths that suck people back into the whirlpool of talking heads confusion. Myth number 1. Because we find evidence that human beings ate certain foods at certain times, that means these are what we are supposed to eat as best nutrition. This is a myth that many researchers and scientists actually get duped by. Let's illustrate this. Let's imagine a scenario. Aliens have hit the Earth with a giant freeze ray. We're all suddenly encased in ice, frozen in place, suspended animation, food in hand and mouth. 10,000 years later, they come back, and they're considering thawing us out and keeping us as pets. And they're trying to figure out what to feed us to keep us healthy. They look at what we were obviously eating: pizza, Twinkies, soda, hamburgers, and so forth. And they logically conclude that this is what we should run best on. What is wrong with this picture? Human beings are able to digest an amazingly wide range of things as fuel, and largely eat whatever is available. Just because human beings ate something at some point in time, we should not assume it is ideal fuel. Assuming is very bad science. We need to keep our kinds of evidence in priority order, our 3 lines of best evidence are to be given much greater weight than assumptions based on what someone ate somewhere, sometime, because they could. So just forget all those theories, fads, and books about nutrition based on this assumption, which is most of them. Myth number 2, your blood type determines what kind of diet you should eat. Yes, there is definite individual variation regarding specific foods or proportions that someone will do best with. Obviously, some people don't do well with gluten or dairy or peanuts or whatever it may be. But this myth is actually readily dispatched by simply smiling at oneself in the mirror. One finds that human beings with type O blood, who are alleged to need a meat-based diet, well, they still have human teeth. Shh, don't tell the blood type people. And these are built for a primarily unrefined plant food diet. And while one hopefully won't see this part of one's anatomy in the mirror, the digestive tract is still built for plants in type O human beings. And this is not to mention the fact that this blood type myth has no science to support it, but quite a bit to refute it. Myth number 3. If you lose weight eating a particular way, it must be healthy. While appropriate weight loss is a wonderful thing for most people in today's obesogenic world, this is a definite no. Now just stop and think about this for a minute. There are many, many effective ways to lose weight. Cancer, very effective, very common method of weight loss, as is its common treatment, chemotherapy. Famine and other forms of starvation are quite effective. Anorexia works wonders. If you eat a diet of styrofoam baseballs, especially if you manage to get them down whole, I guarantee you will lose weight. But you won't be healthy or happy. Just because you can lose weight on a diet doesn't mean your body likes it or that it is a healthy way to lose weight. Don't be duped by this assumption. Myth number 4. Poor health is a time-based issue of modern foods versus ancient foods. Modern lifestyle and nutrition is definitely a problem. But it is not primarily an issue of modern whole foods versus ancient whole foods, or an issue of conventionally grown whole foods versus organic whole foods. This is readily demonstrated by the fact that ancient Egyptian mummies had quite a lot of cardiovascular disease, like we do today. And they ate only 100% organic whole foods. They had no choice, because that is all there was. The Egyptian mummies make clear that terrific or terrible nutrition is not primarily a product of time, but of lifestyle. Lifestyle, in this case, nutrition issues between different kinds of ancient organic whole foods, transcends and trumps all these other issues and theories. Myth number 5. The formal nutritional guidelines have been at least partly responsible for the obesity and disease problems of modern lifestyle. The official United States nutritional guidelines and the direction or pattern of change over time that they've been demonstrating is actually quite striking. The best science and the best experts update the guidelines in ways that increasingly fit the direction and pattern that we have just described. Whoever the latest self-proclaimed nutritional messiah happens to be, or whatever their theory, they all seem to require talking a lot of smack and bashing the guidelines that obviously haven't worked and have gotten us into this present epidemic of chronic diseases. The guidelines haven't worked, so the guidelines are wrong and they are right. Excuse me, does having a speed limit sign mean everyone is staying under the speed limit? No, of course not. Likewise, with nutrition, people have not been following the guidelines, and thus they have obesity and disease. You now know how to know what the best basic diet is for human beings, and how not to be hoodwinked by the most common nutrition myths peddled on the internet today. To your health and nutritional freedom.
Was that helpful?
Yep.
About nutrition myths? I'm kind of excited about those videos. I'm hoping they're going to help a lot of people. And again, those are resources. Those are online. Lifestylefacts.org is the resource. Feel free to share that with people. Okay, let's cover a number of key concepts. Is food moral? In other words, is there anything inherently moral or problematic in a given food and you eating it? No. Why? Honest answer, I love it.
I say yes.
You say yes, okay. So we've got some no's, we've got some yeses.
I don't know.
I don't know, good. Good. Yes or no, depending. Okay, this is actually an important issue. What did Jesus say about what goes in the mouth? What goes in your mouth does not defile a man. Why? Do you remember what he said? He said, well, it goes in and it goes out. That's not what defiles a man. So when you start to look at this, and you look at Paul's teaching about clean and unclean, you look at Peter's experience about, hey, I want you to go eat this unclean meat. In the vision, he didn't actually do it physically. It starts to become clear that there's nothing inherently moral in the food itself. Now, are there moral issues around food? Yeah. Anything that is not of faith is sin. Oh, wow. That could be food, right? Anything that is not of faith is sin. He who knows to do good and doesn't do it, it's sin. It's wrong. But it's really important to understand that there's nothing inherently moral in a food item. We get caught in a lot of cycles, a lot of problematic dynamics when we think that food is inherently moral. We won't get too far into these weeds, but what about, it's getting a lot of attention these days, what about food management in a society where you're using 100 units of your resources to produce one food, whereas you could use 10 units of resources to get the same amount of sustenance? Is that responsible management of your resources, of your society, of the planet? What are Christians called to do way back in the beginning of the Bible? Are we called to be stewards? To be caretakers of the earth, the planet, the animals? Yeah. Personally, I'm disturbed by the fact that in our society in America, it's much of the Christian world that seems to be trashing the planet and promoting trashing the planet. And that's not a political statement, okay? It's not a political statement. That's just, I'm disturbed to see that pattern in our society, whereas Christians, as I read my Bible, should be the ones saying, let's do sensible stewardship. Not radical stuff, but sensible stewardship. Okay. Yes, meat is very inefficient.
And it's unsustainable. The population is so much greater now than it was in biblical times. It's going to be even greater in another 40, 50 years.
Yes, it's unsustainable to do a meat-based diet on this planet with the population trends that there are.
And not only the animal humane aspects of it, but it also takes between 40 to 50 gallons of water to produce one pound of meat.
Yeah.
And it's just not a sustainable.
It's hugely inefficient, unsustainable. Okay, can any of you relate to being stressed and that having an effect on your eating? Did you realize that stressed, spelled backwards, is desserts? Isn't that funny? And again, we talked about stress last time, but stress has a huge effect on what we do behaviorally, including our eating. Cortisol, adrenaline gets going. We want to shove the calories. We want the comfort foods. Sugar. Many people, especially in Adventist circles, have issues with sugar. Sugar does some interesting things with the brain. It will make us feel better, not to the degree a drug will, but it makes us feel better for a short period of time relatively quickly. Is it wrong to want to feel better? No. But do we want to do it in ways that are sustainable and even more pleasurable in the bigger picture? Yes. That's where we make those transitions. But emotions are a big, big factor in terms of our food. And we want to fuel our body, not our emotions. Recognize your emotions, go, oh, well, I'm craving these, I want 3 or 4 donuts right now, jelly-filled custard, please. okay, well, where am I at? Pay attention, tune in, be aware. What's going on with my emotions? How much is emotional? How much is physical? Am I just really, really hungry? And I know this will get me out of the sugar low right away? Figure out how to manage that well. And again, as we understand this and use this model as we go through this, to be able to start to recognize for yourself, why am I experiencing what I am physically and emotionally at any given point in time? What is going on in my time and space, my environment? What is going on with who I am and why I'm processing as I am? Who are you? Out of the blue question.
Yeah.
Out of the blue question. Who are you? A child of God. What was the other? God's child? Not who you intellectually think you should be, but who you actually experientially believe you are, will translate through to what you do and how you live, including what you eat. At the core, not religious issues, but spiritual issues are at the core of who we are and how we live our lives. So often, when we find the physical out of order, dysfunctional, not producing health, the root problem is actually often way back at that who level. Who am I? What is my place, my relationship, and do I have value? If those elements are missing, guess what? Things aren't going to work so well. So even when we're talking about relatively superficial things like donuts, we're whole people. We live as whole people. So food is a fuel, but again, to be enjoyed in the process, but not a therapy. In our society, when a baby cries, what do? Pick him up sometimes. What's a binky? How do we use a binky? Wah! Pop. What are we training people to do? There's something wrong. What's the solution? Put something in your mouth. It makes everything better. Or we're at least going to try that. And then we get to be adults and we wonder why we have this thing. We just want to shove stuff in our face. Well, before we could even remember it, that's what we were being taught. So some of this goes way back to those kinds of issues. And it takes us some process to learn a different way of doing and being. What's she doing? She's enjoying. What is she not doing? She's not watching TV? She's not working? She's not rushing. Is she on her smartphone? She's not even on her smartphone. So what is her state of being? Mindful. She's present. How many of you have been practicing since our last sessions, fulfilling the purpose of your existence and experiencing pleasure? A little bit? Nobody else? We were supposed to practice? Yeah? A little bit? Okay, we got to get with the program, people. This program is a pleasure program. Yes, doctor. Thank you, Sean. Don't feel bad about practicing healthy pleasure. It's what the design is intended for. And when we don't experience healthy pleasure, what do we end up experiencing? I need something, I'm empty, give me something quick, something easy, and is that healthy or unhealthy? Depends on what it is. We tend to go towards the unhealthy, but it could be either one. I'm going to suggest that it is part of our Christian duty to experience pleasure. Intentionally, purposefully. What is heaven full of? You hear the what's going on audibly in heaven. Music, harps, gratitude, praise. can you praise or be grateful if you don't experience pleasure? It would be very difficult. It would be very difficult. So there's this really cool thing. We're supposed to be grateful to our Creator, right? That requires us to experience pleasure for which to be grateful. Some really cool TED Talks on gratitude and happiness and how this process kind of works. And as we recognize some of these good things, we have gratitude, and that produces happiness, an emotional state of well-being. And so there's a sort of this cycle that goes on with pleasure and gratitude that's pretty cool.
I have a question.
Question.
If you know the answer, it's fine. If you don't know it, also it's fine.
Okay.
Do you know anything about different kind of pleasure or obtaining pleasure, something that God intended for us to take pleasure from?
Different kinds of pleasure or getting pleasure from things other than God intended.
Yes, like for instance, I can say, well, okay, God intended me to live for pleasure. I take pleasure doing ABC, which is not
You did address that in the first section,
when.
the second one.
It's okay. It's a good question. So what if we get pleasure from something that's not healthy or different than God intended? That is how we, backwards human beings, tend to go about things. That's sort of our default. Give me the quick, give me the easy, give me the drug, give me the whatever. That's how I became diabetic. Yeah. That is our broken human nature that tries to go from the outside in, where we're designed to function from the inside out. And understanding that we're designed to experience satisfaction and pleasure on those deeper levels, and those are bigger pleasures, more powerful pleasures. People that get into addictions with drugs, there is emptiness or pain on the deeper levels, and they are treating it from the outside in. That's addiction in a nutshell. Okay? That is addiction in a nutshell. You fill those deeper needs, vacuums, pain spots. I don't need the drugs anymore. I don't need them. Why do I need them? My cup is filled. Okay. Moving on. So being present is huge. Consciously, purposefully experiencing pleasure is a huge dynamic. You're struggling with lifestyle changes you want to make? Fill up your pleasure cup, please. Please, in healthy ways. Again, pleasure is not necessarily the objective that we most focus on. The way we're designed is to connect, to function in ways our Maker says we are, and that produces the pleasure. It's an important cycle thing. We did cover that. If you missed some of our previous sessions, they are recorded, they are online, they are very important concepts. How that actually works and doesn't work. Okay, but you have to be present, you have to experience pleasure. And I will skip a story at the moment. So the human body is phenomenal. Understand that we have been given this tremendous gift of our physical body. Tremendous gift, amazing machinery. We're not even scratching the surface with all of our biological science. We want to learn to manage it really, really well. This body will adapt to what it has to deal with, to what we give it, how we choose to manage it. It will learn. It functions in patterns. There are circadian cycles, circadian meaning 24 hours, big changes in physiology every 24 hours that our body adapts to, works through, learns with. The beautiful part is our body will try to do what we ask of it. It may not be good at it at first. That's okay. It will try to adapt. That could be taste. How long does it take to change your taste buds? For me, about a month. Okay? Okay? Depends on how big of a change, how long you're willing to work with it. If a person does a complete change of diet, it's often about a month. Yeah. And it depends on what you're used to. We tend to like what we're used to. Is that not a beautiful thing? That any place in life, any time on the planet, your taste buds will adapt and increasingly like what food is available based on how you're managing it, that is a beautiful thing, designed for pleasure. And our GI system will adapt, and there's all the science on the microbiome, our bacteria, and so forth. So we want to learn to manage this well. Time. There's this scientific realm called chronobiology, time-based biology, that gets really, really cool. For food, this gets into our meal pattern and the body's expectations. The body likes to have regular fuel at regular times. It prepares for it. It actually starts getting ready for the next meal because it's learned to expect it at this time. That is a very cool thing. We want to learn to manage that well. And in nutrition science, you generally want to think of your metabolism like a fireplace. Put the fuel in when you're going to want it to then burn for a few hours. And when you know it wants to rest, don't put a lot of fuel in. Let the metabolism rest also. Important principle. Okay, 2 lessons here. Simplicity. Simplicity is actually a really important thing. I still remember when I was in college, I hadn't learned this yet. Have any of you heard of stratosphere casserole? Cafeteria would take their leftovers and put it in layers in an entree pan and then serve that as a casserole. Yeah. And then you take that along with a bunch of other really complicated foods and you wash it all down with a whole bunch of liquid and it's all swirling around, and it was hard to concentrate in class. Okay, I didn't get that. Hope you got the notes. Okay? The body is designed for certain things, and one of the things that the body really likes is simplicity. Learn the lessons of nutritional simplicity. This picture, that's a complete meal. Rice and beans and squash, that's a complete meal. You don't need 5 other dishes with that. Maybe a salad? Yeah, salad would be good, that would be fine. But think and work towards simplicity. Learn to make it taste really good, please. But learn simplicity. It's actually really important. And cost. I was talking with someone earlier today about cost. Much of the world, for economic reasons, do you know what they live on? Rice and beans. You got it. Is that really expensive vegetarian cuisine? That's the poor man's food. Has been the poor man's food. Vegetarian or healthier eating, whatever you want to call it, can be very inexpensive, but it's not going to be in the specialized vegetarian section of the supermarket with all the really spendy stuff. A little tiny packet of something super organic that's $5. Rice and beans is the go-to. Flavors such as turmeric, ginger. The Indian curry spices? Yeah, so how to flavor food with the spices, yeah. And a lot of spices have really good antioxidants. Am I going to be able to go back here? Maybe not. Give me just a second. I don't want to lose this. So spices, I'm going to not get too far into that for the sake of time. Happy to talk about that afterwards or in questions. But spices, yes, we want the food to taste good. Many spices have a lot of antioxidant benefit, such as turmeric, ginger, so forth. There's some interesting things about spice irritation and when that actually becomes an issue or not that can be important, but we for the sake of time, can't get into that at the moment. But yeah, it's a very important topic, spices, and it's been a commodity of trade around the world for millennia. This one, the research on fasting is really, really impressive. It's really been increasing in recent years. Fasting has been done by mankind around the planet for a very long time. In many different studies of all different types, many animal studies, very consistent findings of significant lifespan extension. It's actually very, very impressive. And we're starting to figure it out for human beings. How can we do this in ways that are relatively doable, to give us the best bang for the effort, and so forth? I'm coming to the conclusion, based on the science, that fasting, appropriately done, is probably one of the only true panaceas, meaning universal treatments. It does pretty amazing things. It resets metabolism. Our body will have a lot of old cells hanging around. They're not dead and gone, but they're just hanging around, taking up space and kind of messing things up. A good, relatively prolonged fast will clean house. You can use fasting in combination with chemotherapy or radiation to dramatically increase effectiveness of treatment and dramatically reduce side effects, both at the same time. Very cool stuff. Fasting for like 5 days will boost your natural stem cell production like 800%.
How many days?
Like 5 days. And there's different kinds of fasts, some total, some partial. We won't get into those weeds. But it's a very impressive, very promising area of research and potential medical therapeutic use. So you want to keep that on your radar. Near fasting, there's all kinds of details. There's time-restricted eating, there's water, there's fasting-mimicking diets, there's juice fasts, there's a lot there. But there's very promising material and use there. Yeah, it's not new to mankind, it's just new to us in America. We think a fast is missing a single meal and we're like going to die. Yeah. So that's called, so you're referring to some of the latest research, that's called time-restricted eating. That's the best terminology to keep that clear, where we're limiting the number of hours that we're eating out of a 24-hour cycle such that our body and our metabolism can shift into a different mode for those other non-eating hours. So we're going to save any other questions until we're done for the sake of time. Time-restricted eating is the best, most accurate terminology for eating within a window of time out of the 24-hour cycle, but not for the other 24 hours. Some people use the term intermittent fasting, but that gets confusing and can mean different things. Okay, what do you think about this statement?
Reminds me of a lady who said, people would say, oh, just treat yourself with whatever food it was. And she's like, that's not how I treat myself. I treat myself nicely.
I treat myself nicely. Yes. So this can be understood different ways. I find in experience that it's really hard if you interpret this as pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You got to somehow come up with this love for yourself that you really don't have any source of to make this work. Or you could understand this as you have value, whether that's been from other people and or your understanding with God. Either way, if you have at your core this sense of identity and value, this works.
Just may be different for others.
If you don't have this somehow within your sphere of experience, this sounds good, but you end up without the critical ingredients. But this does express a fundamental truth. Much of the time when we're not taking good care of ourselves, what is our sense of value? What is our sense of connectedness and the impact that we have on other people and on our Creator? it gets really interesting, and where a lot of real major transformations happen. And again, as we seek to understand this ourselves, to share this with other people, you may have heard me say this before, I believe we have no business telling people what they should or shouldn't do unless we can offer them something better. I think that's very biblical. I think it's very gospel-based, and fortunately, what we are blessed with. Now, I took a few questions in print earlier. I think we've addressed some of them before. I'll just run through a few, and then we'll probably close, and I'll hang out afterwards if people have individual questions. But some of the questions submitted, one was on constipation. And what if you're having constipation when you're trying to do this whole plant food-based thing? Remember principle number 2 of the UP diet? So for the vast majority of people, you get enough fiber and enough liquid in, and constipation is not a problem. There is a small number of people that have significant problems even in that context. And that gets into the uniquely personalized component. Figure out what does and doesn't work for you. Do you have food allergies, food sensitivities, whatever else may be going on? It takes a little bit more work. But for 98% of people, the fiber and the fluid, and we're good to go. Metabolism, some people doing better with like a lot of eggs and vegetables versus an oatmeal-based diet or something similar, don't feel good on oatmeal. Is oatmeal a refined food?
Somewhat.
It can be. Okay, a little more?
Well, for me, it's to open the packet, pour it in, pour the water. That's very refined.
So they open the packet, pour it in, pour in the hot water. That's a very refined oatmeal. You're correct. That oatmeal doesn't have a lot of resemblance to the original oats. What about steel-cut oats? Steel-cut oats are very close to the whole thing. They're just cut. They're not squished and anytime you smush something out, expose it to light and air and time, the nutrition goes away. What's that? Rolled oats? You're in the middle somewhere. Sometimes you get some of your thick rolled oats, sometimes you get the really thin ones. The instant oatmeal is way out here on the refined side. If I eat just a packet or two of instant oatmeal and nothing else, I do not feel good. And I am starved an hour later. It doesn't work. It doesn't work well. It's really interesting. So one of our problems in Adventist nutritional culture is we like our sugar. We tend not to do the meat, but we like our sugar. Read the Spirit of Prophecy, meat versus sugar. We'll talk about that at a future date. You're often better off doing the meat. Now, what I see clinically in this kind of a scenario is two things. Number one, people are not doing a healthy or vegetarian or vegan diet well. I remember I went and visited a doc once, stayed at their home. He was doing some interesting things I wanted to check out. And in talking with he and his wife, it's like, yeah, I tried to go vegan at one point and it just didn't feel good, didn't work out, so we went back to, a meat-based diet. Oh, really? What'd you do? Well, she was living off white pasta and plain tomato sauce. That wouldn't work for me. It doesn't work for the human body. So that's partly why I also don't prefer the terms vegan or vegetarian. As an example, so years ago at an International Vegetarian Nutrition Conference, actually held at Loma Linda, Adventist health studies have shown major benefit and a spectrum based on the more you're doing a whole plant food-based diet versus a standard American diet. Well, over in Europe, they tried to replicate it. And they looked at the spectrum of, animal or not animal, and they didn't get the same result. They didn't see the benefit on this spectrum. So they scratch their heads and they go and they look at data again, and then they start talking to the people. Well, the vegans, say you're 100% vegan in London, and you're living on vegan soda and vegan cookies and vegan ice cream. No benefit to being vegan. So vegan just means you don't have any animal stuff. It doesn't mean it's healthy. So my preference is the terminology of a whole plant food-based diet that focuses on what the primary fuel supply should be, leaves room for flexibility, variations, proportions, for whatever works for the particular person. The other thing that I've observed in these kind of situations where people are doing better on, like an eggs and veggies sort of thing versus, your typical oatmeal sort of thing, is the context of a lot of chronic stress. When someone has been under a lot of chronic stress, your metabolism is pretty shifted. It's not working well. You're not processing well. And sugar's going to jerk you around a lot more. These refined carbs are going to jerk you around a lot more, and your body is going to do better with these slower burning kinds of fuel supplies. That's more an issue of the chronic stress than it is that your body's not designed for that fundamental fuel. Again, we're whole people. It all works together. We're going to save Adventist nutrition culture myths for later. Again, let us know if you want to be part of that. Resources, we showed you a couple with lifestylefacts.org. drfurman.com, again, is one of my favorite resources. One of our attendees did share back with us one of the books. So if you were one of the people looking for, I think it was this, yeah, there we go. It was this book, in fact. So you get the book you wanted. Yes. The Eden Valley recipes that Mike so graciously helped us get. You have a whole cookbook to play with. You can create your own variations on it. Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, Neil Bernard, has a lot of online resources that are freely available. Just, again, be on the journey. Be in the process.
I want to add one more. It's from Eden Valley, World Wide Web, Barbara O'Neill, MD. She's a naturopathic physician in Australia, legates for the Australian government. She's here in the U.S. a couple times a year. Has wonderful YouTube videos. Just Google
YouTube videos associated with Eden Valley.
It's not Eden Valley, it's
Barbara O'Neill.
Barbara O'Neill.
Okay.
O'Neill is all last name. It's not the middle initial.
So we want all suggestions. If it's something I'm not familiar with yet, I'm going to ask that, we just give us some space to check it out before we put it out there. Okay.
Barbara O'Neill has an institute similar to Eden Valley in Australia. It's called Misty Mountain.
Yes.
But they take actually sicker patients here at Eden Valley in the States that they're able to treat in Australia.
So Australia is similar to Eden Valley. So final announcement. So our next session is February 16. We're going to be doing that as a healthy potluck meal. It's the following one on the 23rd. That's the chef provided one, again with Kathy. So look forward to the healthy potluck. And again, we're not so much worried about the weeds. Don't worry if you've got your dish perfected. Have fun with your food. Figure it out. This is going to be a safe place and space and process where we're all out to experience it together, support each other, and learn. Does that make sense? Amen. So let's bow our heads. Gracious Father, thank you that you want us to have abundant life, to be fully satisfied, to be joyful, to experience pleasure on every level. Remind us through our day and through our weeks who we are, that we are your children, that we are valuable, infinitely valuable. And as such, we can have that core fire for real living. We ask that you would remind us to enjoy the moments, to be present, whether it's simply eating a meal, whether it's going for a walk, enjoying the fresh air, enjoying a friendship, whatever that is. Remind us that this is what you intend for us. And we need to have that experience completed routinely. Ask for your presence in each person's life as we go forward, that you would walk with each of us as we figure things out for ourselves and how to best manage this amazing body that you've given us as a vehicle for full person living. In Jesus' name, amen.